Yo, what's going on everyone? Long time no talk. I've been eager to get back on the mic after a quick vacation and some post-vacay procrastination. We're at the All-Star break, and I figured what could be a better time to reflect on the team's performance. To do that, I thought it'd be fun to give out some season grades from what we've seen so far based on both performance and expectations heading into the season. These are my own expectations, of course, so the grading may differ from yours. Let me know your thoughts in the comments though. Alright, let's jump right in. Luke Kornet is tall. That much is clear. Kornet does a great job of being 7'2". In all seriousness though, I wasn't certain what we'd get from Luke this season. The blueprint was there for him to succeed, but he was far from a sure thing. With that said, he's been decent, and a B- feels fair. For most of his career, Luke was viewed as a massive stretch big. Not necessarily a good one considering he's 33% from 3 for his career, but that was the label he was given. The Celtics decided to rip that label right off of him, saying fuck that, you're a rim runner now. As a result, the journeyman has appeared in a career-high 51 games and is playing the best basketball of his career. Luke is shooting just shy of 70% from the field, a stunning number compared to his career 45% from the field. This is a direct result of the Celtics banishing him from the three-point line. Before returning to Boston, 63% of Kornet's field goal attempts came from the three-point line, with 37% coming on twos. This season, the Celtics' get your big ass in the paint mentality has Luke taking 93% of his field goals inside the arc. He has a career-high 44 dunks, making up 38% of his field goal attempts. The next highest figure is 23 dunks, making up 13% of his field goal attempts. He's blocking shots and has become a solid lob threat. You know what you're getting from Luke. Not irreplaceable, not the most skilled, but a hard worker and a guy that's giving the team whatever they ask for every night. Sometimes that turns into double figures with a handful of rebounds and a few blocks. Other nights, it's 10 or less minutes to give Rob or Al a breather. Given that I viewed him as a question mark before the season, I like the answers he's provided. He's earned this B-. Continuing with the bigs, giving Horford an accurate grade depends on what you expected of him this year. To me, a B+ is reasonable. His counting stats are down slightly from last season, but that's not something that bothers me. The Celtics have been calculated in finding appropriate rest days for Horford, and they have the necessary depth to not have to rely on him as much every night. Regular season Horford takes a backseat so playoff Al can be fresh and ready to go. Every now and then he shows how much is left in the tank, like a 20-10 game with 3 blocks against the defending champs. We talked about Kornet's shot profile changing. Horford's has as well in another effort to preserve him for the playoffs. Al began his transformation into a stretch big his final season in Atlanta. From 2016 to last year, 33% of his field goal attempts came behind the arc, with 67% on twos. This season, it has completely flipped. Now he's taking 65% of his field goals from 3 and 35% from 2. He's knocking down 42% of his threes as well. He's also having a slightly underappreciated defensive season in my opinion. Not all defense levels that he's reached in the past, but still good, especially playing as the lone big prior to Rob's return. It's not his greatest season, but when you factor in the goal of getting him to the playoffs in one piece, his output is sufficient, especially in his age 36 season. When the Celtics signed Blake Griffin, I was content. Not for his on-court production, but for the value he added as a great locker room presence. That's held true this year. He gets along extremely well with the team, leading to Joe Mazzulla calling him a cornerstone of the Celtics locker room. That alone is enough to put him in A territory for me, but vibes are unfortunately not the determining factor of these grades. As far as on-court performance goes, Blake has some juice, but it needs to be squeezed out carefully. When he's forced to start 5 consecutive road trip games, things can get kinda ugly, as we saw in early December. But when you can wipe the dust off after a few weeks of rest, he's still capable of putting together a strong performance or two. Seen most recently with 15 against 2 Eastern Conference contenders in Philly and Milwaukee. Does that mean he's being saved for the playoffs like Horford? Maybe? I'd lean towards probably not though, with the window of possibility cracked open slightly. Moving on to our last gradable big man, Rob Williams. I'm going to give him a B+, but it's an interesting question of perspective. On one hand, he's playing great basketball for an athletic center returning from injury. On the other hand, he's still capable of more. In some ways, it feels like he's holding back, which is normal this early in his return. I'm completely on board with that for the sake of getting him to the finish line, but I can't say the high flying isn't missed. He swapped out the consistent rim-rocking dunks for more layups, with just 35% of his field goal attempts coming on dunks. That's 40 total dunks for anyone trying to do the math. The good news is that he's actually shooting a career-high 74% from the field, so the finishing hasn't taken a hit. Defensively, he's absolutely been a big part of Boston's defensive turnaround, offering his usual switchable rim protection services, but I do think it's fair to say those haven't been as jaw-dropping as last year. His blocks per game average is at a career low 1.1, and there are times where he hasn't been as eager or active challenging shots. Still, he's represented well by the numbers, holding opponents to less than 40% shooting when he's in coverage. The process of returning from an injury is difficult for a lot of reasons, but finding comfort in your movements is a tough hurdle to clear. I have to assume Rob is dealing with that at least a little bit. Based on that assumption, he's playing really well so far. Based on his own potential, he's not quite there yet. Transitioning to the wing section of our conversation, let's start with house money, Mr. Sam Hauser. I was high on Sam's ability to contribute coming into this season. He's met those expectations and more. My hope was that he'd crack the regular season rotation as a shooter and hold up just enough defensively to stay on the floor. He's been a three-point marksman, and one of the league's very best with the 20th highest three-point percentage at 42%. And that's even including a 28% December and a 31% January. Now obviously we can't ignore those months in the overall assessment. He was struggling big time. It felt like the scouting report caught on to him and the confidence was gone. In that way, Hauser felt like a rookie. Considering he only played double-digit minutes in 5 games his first year, we basically are witnessing rookie growing pains. But just as quickly as he lost it, Sam turned it right back up, shooting 50% from 3 so far in February on 6 attempts per game. I pointed it out in the past, but people are starting to catch on to the fact that his defense is more than passable as well. He's no Kawhi Leonard, but Hauser can move his feet, keep the ball in front, and typically holds his own. With that said, Sam's A- might be too positive if you're more critical of his slump. I'll accept that for sure, but overall, they've gotten a ton of production from a player making less than $2 million this season. Do I really need to say too much here? Jayson Tatum gets an A+. He's having an MVP level season and leading the Celtics to the best record in the league. Sure, we all have high standards for him, but you're being ridiculous if this season doesn't meet your expectations. Even so, I'm sure someone somewhere will tell me I'm dumb and he actually deserves an A because his defense has been worse. I'll give him that. It has been worse. But when the moment comes and he needs to make a stop, I always trust Tatum in those matchups. With what he's contributing offensively, you give him some leeway there as well. Whether it's fair or not, I don't give Grant Williams the same excuse. He's on the hunt for a big contract, but has gotten away from what's going to earn him that money. Last season, Grant showed that he can be a top-tier 3-and-D wing with the versatility to defend 1 through 5 in small bursts. We aren't seeing that guy nearly enough this year though, especially on the defensive end. As I've touched on, other guys aren't exactly playing their best D so far either, but with it being a big sell for Grant's value, that's something that I expect to remain consistent with him. The effort comes and goes, and he's getting cooked off the dribble far too often. Prior to the season, my hope for him was to build in a driving game to put the ball on the floor and attack closeouts in addition to what he already brought. Credit to him for working on that, because he definitely has, but he's not always picking his spots effectively, whether it's pump faking easy looks or taking inefficient shots when better opportunities for him and the team are on the table. What it looks like is a young guy trying to develop. Truthfully, that's exactly what it is. Grant's only 24. The disconnect for me is that with a championship as a realistic goal this season, the Celtics need Grant playing within himself, while Grant in a contract year needs to step outside the box to show the Celtics and other teams what he can do. The regular season is the best time to try things, but he doesn't have a large enough track record yet for me to believe he'll get back on script when the playoffs roll around. For the Celtics' sake, and his lofty contract goals, I do believe that'd be in his best interest. Another guy I don't believe we need to spend too much time on, Jaylen Brown gets an A. He's dropping 27 points per game on a career-high 49% from the field, while also shooting a career-low 33% from 3. Yeah, that's obviously unfortunate, and hopefully it trends upward post-All-Star break, but it's telling how efficient he's been elsewhere. 7 rebounds per game is great too. Him and Tatum have both stepped up on the glass this year. I'm not as critical about his defense and playmaking as some, but they're definitely the 2 areas keeping him out of A+ territory. I spoke about the playmaking in depth in the last video, so go check that out. The defense, on the other hand, hasn't come through. Last year felt like his best defensive year since his ascent to offensive stardom. I'd really like to see him return to that level, and I hope the playoffs brings that out of him. This dude is a true professional in every sense of the word. I'm giving Malcolm Brogdon an A-, but that even feels like a low ball. Truthfully, the only reason it's not higher is because of some early season inconsistencies and slight inefficiency as a driver. Otherwise, he's shooting the shit out of the ball. It's actually difficult to exaggerate how well he's shooting. He's up to 45.5% from 3, the best percentage in the league, on a comfortable 4.4 attempts per game. He goes on tears of games where it feels like everything he puts up is a bucket. Over the last 15 games, he's averaging 18, 4, and 3 on a 50, 48, 90 shooting split. Just an unreal bench weapon, and he's really grown comfortable in his role as of late. His stoic demeanor seems to wash away the worries of everyone around him, and in a playoff setting, that should be absolutely crucial. Derrick White, A+. White was great last season, but he unlocked his true potential here with a full offseason and the comfort of starting the year with the team. Impact stats rate him as a top 2 most important Celtic, and on many nights he's been in that conversation. Despite the defense slipping for a number of Celtics, Derrick White has been a rock on that end. Among players that have defended at least 700 shots, White has the 6th best defensive field goal percentage of 44.4, holding players to 2.6% worse than their season average. He's having a ridiculous rim protecting season, rotating to cover up holes, and blocking 54 shots this season, the 27th best figure in the league. He, along with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, are the only 2 guards in the top 50. Offensively, he's finally emerged with the consistent confidence that he played with on the Spurs. With the absence of several key players, Derrick took the reins, averaging 17, 4, and 6 on 45, 40, 87 splits over his last 15 games, earning a Player of the Week honor alongside his shot-blocking companion SGA for a 4-0 week, dropping nearly 25 points per game. A confident D. White was one of my biggest keys to success for the Celtics this season, and as long as this mindset carries over as the team gets healthy, the Brogdon-White bench duo is going to be game-changing. It's hard to envision a team that can match their output. I just spoke about a player that has really lived up to their potential with this team. Now we've got to talk about the opposite. Payton Pritchard has not had a very inspiring season. He was pushed deep down the depth chart with the addition of Brogdon, and finding minutes for him wasn't as easy as I imagined. Aside from a few games when injuries allowed for Pritchard to crack the rotation, he hasn't provided the top-tier depth that I was hopeful for. It's difficult to prepare for the game uncertain if you'll play or not, and then try to produce knowing the leash is short. I sympathize with that aspect, but with a larger role in the back of his mind, showing that you can fill whatever role is asked of you is the best way to impress your coaches and others. There was a 7-game stretch from January 11th to the 24th where Pritchard played 24 minutes per game and was solidified as a nightly rotation piece. As I said before, there were a few good moments in games, but overall, 7, 3, and 2, shooting 36% from the field and 29 from 3 without a single free throw attempt isn't good enough. His effort is one thing that remains consistent, and I appreciate that. He gets after it defensively, but the bottom line is that with the amount of size the Celtics sacrifice with him in the game, he needs to bring a more efficient and well-rounded offensive game to see the floor. Pesky defense and effort should be an addition to that, not the main draw. I know this is critical, but that's because I genuinely believe in Payton as an NBA player. He's a good guy, and I hope he ends up in the right situation to expand his game and play through mistakes which won't be afforded here. But at this point in the year, I'm giving him a C-. That brings us to the heart and soul. How do you appropriately grade what Marcus Smart adds to the team? With an A-, of course. If we're talking intangibles and vibes, it's a no-brainer A+. Playmaking, A+. This is by far his best season as a playmaker, marked by his 7.1 assists per game with only 2.4 turnovers. His on-ball scoring game has improved as well, with a more refined shot-making bag. I touched on both of these things in my last video. You're probably wondering where the A- comes from after all this praise. I get that, and I've gone back and forth about raising it as well, but what Marcus has brought offensively is nothing that I didn't already expect from him in this role. He's been stellar on that end, and in his absence, the Celtics offense took a substantial hit. Coming off of a Defensive Player of the Year season, it's understandable that Smart hasn't met those standards so far. It's Marcus Smart we're talking about. He hasn't been bad defensively. When he wants to get a stop, he will. He's one of the league's very best defensive communicators and playmakers. However, players are shooting better than their season average when he's defending them for just the second time in his career. Granted, it's only 0.2% better, but it shows a lack of ferocity in 1-versus-1 matchups that Marcus typically displays in the past. I'm cutting the Celtics some slack here, with the assumption that as the playoffs roll around, the defense will turn up about a few notches, but Marcus will be responsible for kickstarting that. The defense goes as he goes. And there you have it, my mid-season report cards for each eligible Celtic. It's a fun exercise, and I found myself going back and forth on a number of them. Let me know where you disagree here. I'm interested to see if I'm going too easy or too hard on some players. Thanks for watching, I'll catch you in the next one.